Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Beating Phishing webinar. Thank you so much to iOCO and F-Secure for making this conversation possible. My name is Nastasia Arendse, and I will be your moderator for this morning's session. I would like to encourage you that of course, you are welcome to participate in the chat function if you have a particular question that you want to raise throughout this particular session. We'll get to that a little bit later on. And if you are active on social media, the hashtag to use is hashtag beating phishing. And of course, do remember that the recording will be mailed to you at the end of the session. It will be available if there's any parts of it that you have missed. So in terms of the agenda, here's what we can expect. Organizations are doing their best efforts to address the weakest link in cybersecurity. And unfortunately for you and I, the weakest link tends to be people in some cases. And we are starting to see breaches where we are seeing them in the form of phishing as a mechanism of entry. And that's why iOCO and F-Secure is hosting this webinar in order for us to understand why phishing is still so successful for attackers, deconstruct the relevant phases of the kill chain, and learn how to mitigate risk at every phase. So in this session, you're going to hear from Rian Nodia, who's the Director of Consulting at F-Secure, about F-Secure's learnings from global engagements about how attackers target victims, how they craft phishing emails and payloads, and ensure their attacks have been successful amongst other aspects. And then also in his particular session, we'll discover how to build compensating controls at every stage for a holistic defense, in-depth approach, and we'll also see a demo to illustrate how easily attackers can select and target victims. And then as the program unfolds, we are going to hear from Paul Spagnoletti, who is a business unit executive for cloud and security in South Africa for iOCO. And he'll be talking to us about the case studies, including a local financial institution, a municipality that have achieved measurable improvements through innovative approaches to cybersecurity with iOCO and F-Secure. Remember, if you have any questions that pop up while our presenters are on the virtual stage, you are more than welcome to pop them in that chat facility, and we'll get to them a little bit later on in the Q&A stage. Without much further ado, I'd like to welcome to the virtual platform Rian Nodia, who's the Director of Consulting at F-Secure. Rian, the platform's yours. Let's just unmute you there, Rian.
Of course. Thanks for the introduction, Nastasia. I appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. Thanks a lot for joining the session this morning. As Nastasia said, I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about the holistic approach against phishing and how you might best protect your business against this attack. Now, first of all, who am I? So why might I feel qualified to talk about this topic? I ran a part of the F-Secure business called Phished, which focused primarily on awareness training. So I spent a few years thinking about this topic quite a bit. And prior to that, when I was probably much more technical than I am today, I focused a lot on purple teaming exercises, attack detection capability assessments. So we spent a lot of time figuring out how to best protect businesses against a range of attacks, and later the focus, of course, became phishing. I've been with F-Secure for about 7 years now. 5 years of that was with F-Secure in the UK. The other 2 was in South Africa. So what might you expect from this talk? I'm going to just talk about the path an attack might follow. Going to talk about the threat itself. I'm going to give you a brief demo of a phishing attack that specifically highlights why any single individual control might not protect you against phishing. And then, of course, I'm going to talk about the attacker's perspective, which is something that I feel is vital for any defenses you might build, in particular this attack vector. So the cyber kill chain is a coin that it was a term that was coined by Lockheed Martin a number of years ago. We adapted it slightly for use with our attack detection capability services, and so the reason why I like to talk about the cyber kill chain is simply because it'll take any complicated attack, doesn't matter how complex it might be, and split it up into 8 relatively simple phases. So first of all, we've got the external reconnaissance phase. And this is the phase where an attacker will go and understand their target. The first time that they type your business name into Google, that's when the external reconnaissance starts. They go and they might go trawl through LinkedIn. This is where they will go and find the targets, the individuals that they might want to phish, and they will look at job postings. The interesting thing about job postings is you at your business, you will, especially the technical job postings for security and IT, when you specify the skill sets that you require from those individuals that you would want to employ, you will very often name the types of technologies that you use. You will name the types of firewalls you might use, for example. If you're looking for antivirus administrator, you will name the specific types of technical skills you need. And attackers will, through that, they will build a nice picture of your business even before they start any technical work. The delivery phase this is where you generally think about where phishing lives. This is where, the first time the attacker actually interacts with your business. They will craft a payload or an email, and they will send it to an end user with the hopes of convincing them to click on that, to action something on behalf of the attacker. Following that, you've got the code execution. So if the attacker was to send let's use, for example, a macro-enabled document, this is where that will initially execute when the user runs it. Following that, we've got command and control. The code that was just executed, the command and control channel will be established to a computer or a system owned by an attacker out on the internet. Then you've got the persistence phase. Now, persistence is something that is probably, as far as attacks go, one of the only optional items. An attacker doesn't need to persist, but persistence is something that an attacker would like to do simply because they don't want to re-compromise every time that they want to gain access to an environment. So this is where they hunker down in your environment on certain systems to make sure that if a system restarts or something happens, that they can maintain that access that they've already gained. Simply because the initial 4 phases that gaining access to an environment, that probably is one of the longest of phases in an attack. They don't want to redo that, invest that again. Then, as we've had external reconnaissance, we've got internal reconnaissance. This is when an attacker tries to understand where they live on that environment, where did they gain access, how would they move from one system to the next. Active Directory these days is a great way to do internal reconnaissance, and attackers might spend quite some time at this phase as they would on the external reconnaissance phase. Finally, you've got lateral movement. This is where they actually start moving around towards their target, whatever that target might be, or objective. And the objective is, if their goal was to steal money, or if their goal was to exfiltrate valuable user information, this is where that part of the attack lives. So you might want to know what are the threats? What are we worried about? Now, the recent Verizon DBIR report, which analyzes a range of compromises across the globe, F-Secure is a company that contributes to that report, found that 36% of breaches had a confirmed instance of phishing. Phishing is an incredibly popular attacker action. If we, one of the reasons why I decided to put this talk together, and also there's accompanying this talk, there is some downloadable content for you that talks about building resilience through, through the attacker's perspective, was that a lot of the technical conferences that Black Hat, DEF CON, even DerbyCon a few years ago, these conferences, very few of the speakers actually concentrate on this threat. Very few speakers talk about phishing in this way. And I thought, well, it's almost as if the industry gave up on this threat. Let's just accept that we'll be phished and let's figure out what to do next. But in my mind, as with any sort of threat, there has to be a solution. So I went and I thought, well, what might the solution be? Well, let's first understand what the threats are, and we'll take it from there. Now, you might think that the people you need to be worried about is anonymous people that wear balaclavas and maybe hoodies, but the reality is that the people that are targeting and compromising big businesses, big businesses, smaller businesses. There was a a bit of news on Carte Blanche a few months ago, where they spoke about compromise of smaller businesses, and where invoices had details changed so that people actually pay the threat actors as opposed to the actual as opposed to the actual people who delivered services. The reality is that attackers have, in my opinion at least, if I think about how much effort goes into running a red team engagement, how much investment goes into running a red team engagement, they have targets, they have offices, they have meetings, they have, these are organized crime, these are organized businesses. So we shouldn't think of the attackers as people simply sitting in their basements trying to arbitrarily target businesses. There's big organizations that we are, that we are protecting ourselves against, if you want to call it like that. So let's just quickly talk about the attack, and specifically in the context of this talk. So there's two things we're worried about. The one is attackers are trying to infiltrate our business, gain access and impersonate. The other is that they are looking to exfiltrate information, steal credentials, gain access to funds, steal money from your business. So when we talk about the next steps, we're going to talk about these two types of attacks specifically. Now, traditionally, we think of phishing attacks or phishing emails as an email that has spelling mistakes in it, or something that obviously looks like a phishing attack. I remember initial training years ago. If you were to do security awareness training, I'll tell you to look for spelling mistakes in phishing emails. Now, I know of a lot of legitimate emails that I might have sent even that has spelling mistakes in them, and of course, if we are worried about sophisticated attackers, we have to assume that sophisticated attackers have the same sort of resources that we do when we perform actual phishing attacks. We make sure that the phishing email is well crafted. We make sure that the phishing email looks very legitimate. And when we phish different countries and different languages, we make sure that those emails are professionally translated. We use professional translators to do this for us. So we just have to assume that if we put this much effort into an actual red team engagement, that the attackers would have almost potentially more resources than we might have to perform these sort of attacks. So we've got three examples here. The one is a simple WhatsApp email that talk about there's going to be a problem with your encryption certificate. Please click on this link. And as we know that there's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt around WhatsApp over the last few years. So people want to make sure that their WhatsApp is secure. So if you send an email like this to an arbitrary user, they might be inclined to click on that. And just to also mention that all these emails I'm showing you are actual phishing emails that we've used, and they were all very successful. The next one is a Google account, an email from Google. So most people have Google accounts, and when you receive something like this, you might be inclined to click, even if it is on an email address that you might not expect. So people would use, of course, they would use Google with, of course, a Google email address, but very often we send this to a corporate email address, and people, you're busy with your day, you see an email, you click on it, it's very, very successful. And this is the other one from something relating to the World Health Organization, and COVID-19 type phishing emails became extremely popular during the last 2 years, 18 months. So you might say, well, would I actually be a target? Now, in your personal capacity or in your capacity as an employee of a business, you might say, I'll never fall for a phishing email. Now, I personally also say that. I'll never fall for a phishing email. And when I just moved to the UK, I still had a bank account in South Africa. I still do, but at the time I was primarily using that account. And for whatever reason, I locked myself out of my online banking. Problem was, for this specific bank, you had to go into a branch to reset your online banking. And of course, being in the UK, I was unable to go to a branch, and struggling with that for a few days, eventually giving up. I received an email on my Google email address, and they said that, we just enabled this new feature where you could go and reset your online banking password online. Now, being in a situation where I'm struggling to get access to my funds, I was like, okay, wonderful, I'm going to click on this. The moment I clicked on that email, I thought, well, this is, this can't be right. That this seems too much of a coincidence. Now, at the time, the attackers were, of course, I didn't know what my password was, so even if I clicked on it, it didn't really matter because I couldn't enter my actual password. But I spotted that the URL was incorrect, and it was something to be worried about. Now, in your personal capacity, there's a lot of such emails that go around, and attackers, they play the numbers game. They hope that individuals would click on these sort of emails, and as was evidenced by my own situation, you fall for it because you are in a particular situation where you need it. So very often when you click on a phishing email, it's a emotional reaction rather than you thinking that this is the right thing to do. So yes, of course, you'll be a target in your capacity at work. Of course, you are an entry point into a business. So attackers, depending on what you expose, they might target you as well. Now, why would they do that? So attackers are looking for you as an individual. So you might have something personally that they're looking for. They are looking for your money, your business's money. They're looking for your power. And what I mean with power is processing power. Now, cryptocurrencies these days, as have been over the last few years, is very popular, and it's very expensive to mine because you have to have a lot of resources to do that. But one great way to do that is just to use other people's resources. So a lot of people might download computer games that have been cracked, and you always have to ask yourself, why would this be? Why would an attacker go through the effort of cracking a game? Because that's no trivial task. But they do that to gain access to something, and very often you play your game or you run your software that you might have downloaded from torrents, and the attackers in the background use your processing power to their benefit. But what we are concerned about when we talk about corporate security specifically is we're worried about your access, the access that you already have. There's a saying I like, and that is the best way to get someone's password is just to ask them. Now, asking for a password through a phishing email might seem like a silly thing to do, but it's very easy, well, relatively easy, and I'm going to show you a brief demo also to just highlight how simple that might be. So this demo, the moment I started, it plays. So just want to quickly set the scene here. So what's happening in this phishing email is it's an email where two-factor authentication is used in a business. Now, you might think that, well, the moment two-factor authentication is enabled, you're safe. Phishing is no longer a problem. And this is the sort of recommendation you'd frequently see. People would say, go enable two-factor authentication. Now, as great as that would be, you can't only enable two-factor authentication. This is an example of how one specific control can be bypassed. So what you'll see here is we've created a phishing a website that looks very much like Office 365. So the user is sent an email. The user clicks on it because they think they're going to authenticate normally. The user is presented with a fake web page, our fake web page. They then log into that with their legitimate credentials. We capture those credentials from the back end, and we then prompt the user to enter. Well, we then prompt that the Office 365 web page to send a two-factor authentication code. The user, of course, enters this two-factor authentication code into the fake web page, which we, of course, also capture, and the user just receives a message that you need to log in again. Now, as far as we actually pass the user through to an actual logon. So as far as the user is concerned, everything was successful. They logged in, but luckily for us, we've captured their tokens. So user logs in, they enter their legitimate password. And you'll note the URL, that is definitely not Microsoft. The attackers received the two-factor authentication code, or the user received the two-factor authentication code, and we capture that two-factor authentication code. And through that, on our created web page, the user just goes to a normal web page. We've got their credentials there, and we've got their authorization tokens captured. So as you can see, two-factor authentication didn't provide any real protection here in this instance. So it's very important that we don't implement any individual single control and think to ourselves, we are now protected against an attack. And that is the entire premise of this talk. It is that we need to look at our businesses from the attacker's perspective. We need to understand, if an attacker was to attack us, how would they do that? The various steps that they might perform through their attack, what might they do? Now, it's important to understand that you cannot, in my opinion at least, prevent every individual attacker action, but you can prevent every individual attacker. Now, I showed you the cyber kill chain earlier, and I showed you 8 various phases. Now, the first, you might imagine that phishing occurs only in the delivery phase of the cyber kill chain. The reality is that the first 4 phases, delivery, external reconnaissance, delivery, code execution, command and control, all of those phases need to be successfully completed in order for the phishing attack to be successful. Each of those phases represents an opportunity for you to prevent and or detect an attack. So what do? How can we as a business build resilience against phishing attacks? Now, first of all, you take the external reconnaissance phase of the attack. Look at your business in the same way an attacker might. Look at it from an objective point of view from the internet. Go and have a look at what an attacker might see. If you Google your business's name, if you look at any devices or systems that you might expose on the internet, what does that look like? What sort of information do you have available on LinkedIn for your end users? What does your internal policies dictate what users are allowed to put out on the internet? What information presented on the internet might be of use to an attacker? And gaining an understanding of your external, this isn't necessarily only your attack surface, a technical attack surface. It is really what users put out there. What sort of information might be found on social media? Now, LinkedIn, of course, is very popular. So you might want to look at what sort of targets on LinkedIn would seem appealing to an attacker. And that is why it's very important to perform open source intelligence gathering against your own business. Now, there's a lot of tools that allow you to do this in almost an automated fashion, but this is, you can very easily simply start with Google. Log on to Google, type your business's name, see who works there, look at LinkedIn, see what sort of information is there. Very importantly, look at your job postings. Look at your technical job postings for both security teams and IT teams, because this information is valuable to an attacker. If they know what sort of firewalls you use, what sort of antivirus you use, even if they look at historical job postings, it's important that we put the right policies in place for the HR teams who post the jobs, for the various hiring managers that post jobs, to make sure that the information we put out there shouldn't be too descriptive about the technologies that we use. Instead of, for example, employing an FCK antivirus administrator, have a look at someone who can operate antivirus generally. Just be a bit more generic with this. And of course, when an individual comes for a phone interview or an actual in-person interview, a face-to-face interview, you can talk to them a bit more detail about what they might need. But the delivery phase, this is where it becomes technical and a bit more interesting. It's important to understand, if an attacker was to phish us, what sort of payloads would they have to use? What sort of payloads can we deliver? I haven't yet mentioned the MITRE attack framework, but the MITRE attack framework is a great resource for threat intelligence and the various types of attacks that is used and that is known. So an approach you can take here is, and an approach that we take is, we start off with sending benign payloads to an email address owned by ourselves. So you start off with send just a basic Word document, macro-enabled Word document, PDF, HTA files, various types of files, just to see what is allowed if these payloads are clean. It's important to understand also that by its very nature, a phishing email, the moment, whether it's malicious or not, technically malicious or not, the moment it lands in an inbox, it's already bypassed all the technical controls on your perimeter. And this is now, of course, where the next stage is coming. We'll get to that in just a moment. So have a look at what can be delivered. What sort of URLs are allowed to send emails to your environment? Do you have all the right checks enabled to ensure that that the right payloads are blocked. For example, you might say that our business uses macro-enabled documents. The question is then, do everybody need macro-enabled documents? Is there only a subset of people? Is it only the finance or HR team that needs such payloads? If so, block the users from the right users from receiving such files. It's important that we apply the principle of least privilege at every step. Then it's important to look at, would users actually recognize a phishing email? Now, this is where awareness training comes in. Make sure that you introduce users to actual phishing emails. And this is something we've been doing for a few years, making sure that, awareness training isn't just a page that the user has to, a video user has to watch, but it's an actual phishing email. The user might click on it, and then I'll point it to training. Now, there's many providers that provide such training. There's a lot of open source tooling out there that allow these sort of phishing campaigns to be run. One is called GoToPhish. That is a great open source solution that is frequently used. And by doing this, you evaluate your web mail gateways. By delivering these technical payloads, you evaluate and see what your mail and web gateways actually do allow to enter your users' mailboxes. And then properly consider user awareness program design. It's important that you build campaigns in a way that is that mimics actual phishing emails. That is true of the day. I mentioned earlier that COVID-19 was very popular, so we readily introduced those sort of campaigns to the work that we do to make sure that users are tricked in the same way that we tricked in the real world. There's no use using the same type of phishing email month after month, and this is something we've had as well. Businesses that run the same exact phishing email every month. That doesn't help. Click rates go down, but it doesn't really provide any benefit to the business. As with delivery code execution, quite interesting. You need to make sure that all the types of payloads that actually land in your inbox, go and have a look and see how they might execute. Do you have telemetry on your endpoints? Do you have the right controls on your endpoints? Do you have EDR running? Do you have the right antivirus running? Because ideally, only a subset of the emails that actually land on your endpoint would be able to execute. And for those that execute, make sure that you've got the right telemetry. Do you have the right logs that are being generated? It's very important to understand what sort of logs are generated, because it's not possible to prevent every attack, but at the very least, it is possible to detect an attack. So if something could execute, what would that look like? What sort of telemetry do we need? Consider using risk modification in the monitoring stack. Now, what I mean with risk modification is simply that an alert on an endpoint on a laptop might mean something different than an alert on a domain controller. So have a look at, do you have a different weighting on an alert on these different types of systems, on different types of environments? The execution of a macro within the finance team might mean something different to an execution of a macro on the receptionist's desktop. It's important to look at the differences in the context that your environment provides. And then finally, we've got command and control. Even if all three of the first steps were completely successful, command and control is where another opportunity arises for us to prevent and or detect an attack. So test command and control from your network. Understand what sort of channels are possible. Do they have to use HTTP, HTTPS? Can they use DNS? Is it possible for them to even use ICMP? We very frequently have, we ask clients like, would ICMP command and control channels be possible? They said no, not at all. We block that. But then you can ping Google, you can ping these various types of websites, showing that actually does work. Ensure consistent web configs, web gateway configs. If you have multiple proxies with multiple web gateways, make sure that the configurations are consistent, because it very often happens that an attacker can't exfiltrate information through a specific gateway, but they are able to use another, or sometimes even there's no proxy in place, only a firewall access through to the internet. attempts to exfiltrate data via these channels. So if you are able to establish a command and control channel, go and check if you can actually exfiltrate data, because often command and control can be established, but the moment you start pushing a lot of data through those channels, that is when your alerts might start firing. So have a look and see what is possible. What do you prevent? What do you detect? And then, by doing these actions across all of these phases, it allows you and your security operations center to know what to look for. By understanding exactly what is possible at all of these phases and what an attacker would have to do at a minimum, that allows you to understand, if we can't prevent these attacks, let's at least know what to look for and never build the right types of alerts and capability for that. So the conclusion is, make sure that you understand your environment in the same way an attacker might. Have a look at your environment through the attacker's perspective, and make sure that you get teams involved to help you replicate these attacker actions that you might be worried about. By having a look at your environment in that way, and if you can, doing this frequently, at least once a quarter if possible, that will allow you to not only see the absolute ability of your environment to prevent and detect these attacks, but it allows you also to track and make sure that you can show return on investment on your prevention and detection stacks. So thank you very much, everybody. If there's any questions, please let me know. Happy to take.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. If there are any questions, we'll deal with them a little bit later on in the Q&A facility. That is Riaan Nadir is the Director of Consulting at F-Secure. And I do see some questions already that have been coming out through the session as Riaan was speaking. So thank you so much for that. We'll address them in a short bit. The next speaker for today is Paul Spagnoletti. He's the Digital and Technology Business Executive at iOCO. And he's going to be talking us through the local case studies across public sector, banking, and more. Paul, over to you.
Thanks, Natasha. I mean, you almost gave me a promotion there, so that was pretty cool. But thanks very much. Yeah, as introduced, I have the privilege of leading our cloud and security capability within South Africa for iOCO. Obviously, a very relevant area. And before I get going, I would like to just say a huge thank you to everybody that has attended this morning. The response has been overwhelming, which is always fantastic to see, and that's just obviously testament to what a relevant topic and concerning topic this is for both us as individuals within the country today, and globally for that matter, because it's obviously not a South African phenomenon, phishing, but also from an organization perspective. And Riaan, I'd just like to thank you for your presentation. I found it super informative, and F-Secure is just an absolutely fantastic partner for iOCO, and we really are blessed to have you guys as a partner. Easily one of our best partners that we work with in the market today, and we just go from strength to strength. It's not only about technology. Technology, I always say, is only about 5% of the problem. It's actually the change management and the services behind that make things work. And with a partner like yourselves, that always seems to never be a problem. So a huge shout out to you guys for what you mean to us as an organization, as iOCO. So I saw some fantastic questions through the chat during the course of Riaan's presentation. I think they're all really good questions, and I'd like to give Riaan some good time to be able to answer those. So I promise you that I won't take more than 10 minutes, which will allow us to probably have a good part of nearly 15 to 18 minutes to go through some of those questions. So please feel free to continue sending those questions through, and we will try to get to them, to all of them if we can. Naturally, it's a whirlwind presentation. To go through phishing in 30 minutes is difficult, and we would be delighted at the opportunity to have further conversations with you guys post this webinar individually, and really take into context your organizations and the challenges you're facing versus a generic overall presentation which we've taken you through today. So please reach out to us after the webinar. It would be a privilege and a delight to work with you guys individually and understand how we can both support and help you. So as I mentioned, my responsibility is cloud and security. So our cloud world runs right from hosting platforms all right into the hyperscale providers like AWS, Amazon, AWS, same company, believe it or not, AWS, GCP, and Azure. And in the security space, really, it's like a hand-in-glove relationship, and that's why we brought those two worlds together, because we believe that moving into cloud often brings up security questions and that type of thing. So it really is something that we see as a very important conversation to have. So without further ado, let me take you through what I've got for you today. So what I thought I would do is, as Anastasia said, I'll take you through some case studies. I've just selected 2 of the many that we've got, but maybe just give you a perspective of where we come from as iOCO and how we see security. We're under no delusion or illusion that cybersecurity is complex. And so to manage this, we obviously have fantastic partners like the likes of F-Secure from a technology perspective that enable you to be protected as an organization. But we've also based our whole strategy and go to market around key kind of standards and best practice in the market today. So those are fundamentally around the NIST framework, CIS controls, and ISO 27001. And through looking at our security portfolio, we basically designed a structure or a set of 5 different pillars that we help organizations protect their environments from. So we kind of really start on the identification side of things. Once we've identified any risk, we look at how we can protect your organization, obviously detect any of the vulnerabilities or risks to your organization, have the ability to respond, and then recover. And the key for us is that often it's not only a technology scenario. Sometimes most of our customers already have technology in place, and it's about being able to leverage and utilize that technology effectively. So as iOCO, we provide both point solutions like in partnership with F-Secure, where we can hone in on a specific risk, like maybe phishing or endpoint security, threat detection, vulnerability management, etc. Or we can look at things like mail and archiving. But other times we need to provide a more holistic service. And so we've also developed a SOC and a SIEM at iOCO, which provides security as a service to our customers. And we've basically put in a dialed approach here, which says that we can provide a service or a managed service across any one of these 5 pillars, but we can also focus in on certain areas and provide that as a service back into your organization in specialist areas or as a whole, or we can provide technology and support to a specific need that you might have. So we do believe that whilst cybersecurity is super complex and it's extremely broad, I mean, if you look at the types of controls that one needs to comply with, I don't know what the last count was, in excess of 100, to cover all of those is really difficult. But in the way we've built up the business from a security perspective and the breadth that iOCO has as a broad organization, we believe we are a partner that can safeguard you. Our approach to the market is a three-tier strategy to what we believe in building success. Really starting by looking at the big picture within your organization, then looking to identify your requirements, and obviously then underpin that with a service or a set of tools that can help you to protect yourself. So it's really about saying, how do we understand your world? Then how do we align with your security strategy if you've got one in place? If not, help you to develop one, and then align that with the business requirements, because those are super, super important. And there were a couple of questions in the chat that talk to the business and security, and just on the the awareness training. I don't have it up in front of me now, but one of the delegates asked around the complexity of taking users through that journey, and that's a business challenge. So we can really help organizations around that through change management principles and awareness training and many other principles. And then ultimately, obviously, the third leg of this 3-tier to success strategy that we have is to obviously deploy services or technology to help you to manage your environment. So just getting into the case study, which is what I was really here to do. As I said, I've got two for you. The one is a slightly less traditional use case, and that's why I thought it would be lovely to share it with you guys. And the second is more traditional, but there's a specific reason why I'd like to share that with you. So in the first one, we worked with a large financial services institution, a banking organization, and they recognized that within the ATM network, that the ATMs at an endpoint perspective were required a little bit more security. Let me put it that way. I'm not going to say they were insecure, because we would all probably walk out of this webinar feeling quite worried about our banking partners. But they were secure, but they could be more secure. And so they really looked to a partner to see how could they better secure the ATM infrastructure. They have some unique kind of operating systems running on these devices or endpoints, and so they are rather unique in the constitute of a IT architecture. So together with F-Secure, we sat down with this bank, looked at the ATM network, understood what the associated risks were within the network, looked at the operating platforms, looked at other technology that was involved. One of the things that we found, and many of you will recognize this, is endpoint technology has one little challenge often, in that it doesn't play so nicely with other endpoint technology. So competitive technology typically kind of they conflict with each other if you put them on the same device, which is quite interesting. So we worked with the bank to understand how we could best overcome this problem with the traditional endpoint security, plus what we needed to do on the ATM side. We worked that out. We believed that F-Secure's application control and radar solution was the best fit for it. We did some POCs, and we're really grateful that we were selected as the right technology partner of choice, and we've gone through and implemented that solution. So what we brought to the table was around understanding their security strategy, some advisory and thought leadership. We provided skills around the implementation side, but what was really key for the bank was that they wanted to run this application themselves, or this endpoint security themselves. So we did a lot of knowledge transfer. In fact, we did 30% of the deployment. In that 30%, we did a huge amount of train the trainer and knowledge transfer so that they could deploy the last 70%. So the other capability we brought to the table was training. And then last but not least, which is obviously critical to most projects, is project and program management. So we managed that program right from the POC stage and into the implementation stage, and throughout until the point of complete handover. And then post that, obviously, we're providing support services as well to the bank. So a really nice, different kind of scenario. What I wanted to also say just before the case studies is I haven't focused the case studies on phishing, because I think Rion's done a fantastic job in explaining some use cases around that and the breadth of it. What I'd like to share with you through these two case studies is the breadth that F-Secure can provide to you as an organization across your security landscape. So the second and last sort of case study that I'd like to share with you was at a local municipality. And what's interesting about this, and why I like this case study so much, is that prior to us implementing F-Secure in this organization, they had an endpoint security platform in place, and it was doing a job. But this organization felt through the consultancy initiative that we did with them that F-Secure could provide far more than what they currently had. The key for me around this implementation was the ease that we could switch out the two different technologies and the mitigation of risk to the municipality whilst doing that. There was zero. So it was really nice to know that the soapboxing sales pitch really in practice actually came down to being a reality. And the switch across from the incumbent solution to that of F-Secure was seamless, and it's been seen as very, very successful. So they were really looking for a very comprehensive protective management system that was able to remediate around software and cater for the entire ICT landscape. Their key requirements from a technology perspective was that we were able to provide cross-platform management, patch support, software license management, asset management and tracking. Obviously, endpoint protection, I guess that goes without saying. Secure management, they are distributed as a municipality, so some of the areas connectivity is an issue, etc., but they needed a distributed ability to manage their environment, and as well to provide bandwidth throttling. And so from an iOCO perspective, we were able to bring to the table some advisory and training services again, the right technology to fit the right requirement, and deliver on the set objectives of the organization. And then obviously through our technical capability, provide the implementation and support services together with our partner F-Secure, which was a resounding success. So really that in a nutshell is what I really wanted to share with you guys today. I think I said, 10 minutes. I think I'm 12 minutes, so sorry about that. But I think we've got 15 minutes that we can allow for some questions to be asked and answered.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to just start with any random question. A lovely part about our delegates and attendees is that majority of them are typing in their questions and comments in the chat facility, and the others are kind of assisting each other. It's like a team collaborative effort, which is quite interesting. The first question I'm going to tackle, and I'm going to throw it at you, Rian, and Paul as well, if you can touch on it. The first one says that we've been accused of entrapment, and entrapment is written in inverted commas, by users when issuing phishing simulations. Users don't yet realize that they've been trained and tested, and it'll take time for users to see the purpose of phishing simulations. How do you bring that conversation up in a team, in a company, that this is for their own good? Let's start off with you, Rian.
So that is a question that we've also had before. People are quite upset when they fall for phishing email, and I know the reason for that is because it's almost a personal thing, and you touch people's egos if you do that. So when they fall for phishing email, but everybody, it's important to talk to, maybe if you've got an employment pack, or when you have general training for people, to talk to them and say, this is how we do awareness training. This is why we do it in that way. We introduce you to actual phishing emails, because rather you learn through a simulation than through an actual real world phishing attack. And also, make sure, maybe just a point I just want to raise, make sure that you do that in a way that you encourage people to report phishing emails. Make sure that when they do fall for it, that they actually feel encouraged to report that, rather than just keep it to themselves. Because that's also something that we see happen a lot. People just keep that, we clicked on it, but we're not going to tell anybody.
Paul, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, not too different from Rian. I think it's always a fine line, right? Because you do want to provide a lot of change management within the organization around this, and awareness programs help. But there are other initiatives that you can create around change management and making your employees aware of this. At the same time, you do want to almost catch them off guard so that they become aware. Like, if I tell you I'm going to send you a phishing mail, well, you're kind of defeating the point of it a little bit. But you do want to, I think the suggestion by Rian around having some kind of almost, call it an incentive program, whereby people that actually recognize a phishing mail are almost rewarded in some kind of way. So you turn from being a victim to actually being a hero type of idea. So there are many mechanisms that one can utilize in organizations to try and drive that. But I think it's all around, to Rian's points, the psychology of a person. If you're caught out, you feel like you're doing something wrong. It's that shame kind of feeling, and that's always difficult to deal with people. But it's about how you package it. So I think behind the scenes, you've got to kind of have almost a reactive change management program to help that person or that department or that group of people to understand, the benefits of what they've actually been through. So yeah, that's kind of, we've spent a lot of time on that with partners and companies that we've worked with. It's typically worked quite well.
Okay, so let's build on that a little bit with another question that's come in. And this one says, you put in place systems to protect and implement phishing awareness training software, but how effective are these tools? We are aware that people are the main vulnerable point for companies and in their personal lives, and you can train your staff as much as possible, but it seems that the user doesn't seem to learn. So we're coming back to this training that even though we have these mechanisms in place, the training somehow drops the ball here and there. How do you address that, Rian?
Right. So at the end of the day, the premise of this this presentation is the fact that we have to assume that every control at every phase would in some way fail. So in the same way, awareness training will never be 100% effective, but there will be some at least 80-90% effectiveness. So the idea is that if a range of people is phished within your business, the goal isn't that nobody clicks on it, because people will fall for these sort of things. That's what social engineering does. The idea is to get at least one person to report the fact that there was a phishing email. So it is there's this fallacy almost that defenders have to get everything right, and defenders have to get everything right where attackers only have to get one thing right, and that's not really true. I think the opposite is true, that if you build a layered defense, there's many things that we actually can get wrong, but the important thing is that at least a few things go right, and that is what we want to do here.
Okay.
At each of these phases, yeah.
All right, so I'm going to stay with you with this next question. It says, when you notice blocked communication to a CNC IP address, is that an indicator of compromise?
So if that's it, yes, if that's a known bad IP address, and something from your environment is communicating or attempting to communicate to that address, it's 100% an indicator of compromise, because something ended up in your network that is trying to communicate to something that's known malicious. The only reason why that would happen is if the thing trying to establish the communication is in itself malicious. So absolutely, don't assume that the problem's gone away because it's been blocked. We have to understand, why did that happen in the first place?
Okay. So this one is, I suppose it's an interesting question that's come through, and I'm wondering if both of you would have an answer to it. And it might put you on the spot a little bit. It says here, do you, in your opinion, think that there will come a time in the future when all cybercrime will be eliminated? I'm not sure. So perhaps let's build this one a little bit and add on another aspect to this question and say, what does it hinge on in terms of our ability to tackle cybercrime, to tackle phishing to the best possible way? Does it hinge on regulation? We do have a cybercrimes bill that was signed, but it's not really active at this point. Do you see that future materializing, Paul?
Starting with me, no, I don't. That's just the reality. I think we will continually get better at protecting our organizations and mitigating the risks far more securely. Absolutely. Will it ever go away? I don't believe it will. I think it's the new, we've spoken about it for decades, right? I'm giving away my age now because I'm talking decades, not years. But, that is the next world war, right? That's how world wars are fought today. They fought in the cyber world, not with guns. The gun is a piece of code now, and that's the reality. And, Rian mentioned it earlier. It's not some, a kid, pimply faced kid sitting in a dark room, playing around and having some fun and seeing if he can get a couple of bucks. These are highly sophisticated, structured organizations that live like 365, 24/7 in doing this work. So what the likes of F-Secure and other organizations are doing is they're getting better at keeping up. You're never going to get ahead of them because this is what they do, and we are always trying to protect organizations, but we're way further along than we were a few years ago. So will it go away? No. Will they get more sophisticated? Yes, but so are the F-Secures of the world getting better and better. So I wish I could tell you differently, but I don't believe that. I don't know what Rian's view is.
Rian?
So I think that cybercrime is as likely to go away as crime in general. So when will people just stop pickpocketing other people, and when we're breaking into houses? That's unlikely to go away. As long as there's an incentive for people to do such things, which is financial in most cases, that will stay. Paul mentions keeping up with attackers. So one thing that we at F-Secure do is we consider ourselves to be a research-based consultancy, and that means that we we perform research in the same way attackers might. So we try to push the industry forward and find holes in things in the same way that attackers might. For example, we've got recently, over the last 6 months, 12 0 days in mainframes. We produced a framework called C3, which is a command and control framework that ties into a Cobalt Strike. And these sort of things build on it's new research. It's things that push the security industry forward. So I think at the end of the day, unfortunately, no. The answer is no. It won't go away. We'll have jobs for a long time to come.
And we'll have conversations like this, hopefully, as well. But the next question says, what aspects of MFA are more secure? Rian, do you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, I mean, so what makes MFA more secure is that an attacker has to, I mean, the goal for all of this is we want to raise the cost in investment for an attacker to actually have a successful attack. So having MFA means that you remove a whole range of attackers that might not have the time or money to invest in actually building the sort of campaigns that would allow you to be successful. So MFA is secure in the fact that an attacker can't just steal a password. If there's a password breach out there, we all know password breaches happen frequently with all these massive data breaches. An attacker can't just take that information and then compromise your account. They have to actually actively target you in the same way that we showed earlier with the web page. So now they can't just use your password. They have to go and build a campaign. They have to target you. They have to find you. It's much more complicated to compromise someone in that manner. So yeah, please, that demonstration wasn't to show that MFA is ineffective. It absolutely is. It is simply the idea is that too can be bypassed as any other control might be.
Okay, cool. So the next one says, has anyone considered implementing the DMARC standard? I don't know who wants to take that one. Rian, do you want to take it?
I'm happy to take it. Yeah, and DMARC standard it's widely implemented. Yeah, I mean, so that's one of the things you need to do when you evaluate your web and mail gateway, well, specifically mail gateway controls, is to make sure that you enforce the DMARC standard on your mail gateway. You want to make sure that the sort of emails we receive is authenticated in some way, and that the various policies that have been implemented by the domain owner that you are part of the solution by implementing that on your mail gateway. I'd say most environments have that in there by default, but of course that's not true for everybody. So there's one thing about DMARC. These sort of words are thrown around very often by security professionals, but it's important that everyone understands exactly what these sort of controls mean and how to implement them. Because I think we should use what we have available, and that's a great standard to implement.
Okay. The next question says, can a company monitor phishing that its employees received? Is there a way to do so?
Yeah, so one of the best ways to do that is by having an effective mechanism for users to report a phishing email. So absolutely recommend having a solution where there's a button the user can simply click to report a phishing email. Failing that, a solution, well, at least awareness that users should forward an email to the security team. But that is how you monitor for phishing emails. So you can monitor for phishing emails that has known bad content, but then we can assume that these are less skilled attackers. The idea is simply that by the time an email reaches your inbox, a malicious email, a phishing email, it's already bypassed technical control. So the only way it can be detected is by a user reporting it. So that is how we monitor for it. Especially the bigger the environment, the easier it is for that to happen because you've got more people to potentially detect it. But yeah, that's the best way to monitor.
Okay, so we've got about less than a minute or so, and let's try and tie it up together here. So in terms of, the way forward, say you're a delegate and you're listening to this conversation and you want to step up your level of your, security awareness within your own organization. Where are the low-hanging fruits? What can I go and implement now? What kind of conversation can I start to have right now with my team? Rian, do you want to take that?
Sorry, will you just mind repeating the last bit there?
So you're an organization, you want to start taking your security seriously. What kind of conversations should I be starting now? Where can I begin? The low-hanging fruit, so to speak.
So the low-hanging fruit absolutely is have a look at your controls and make sure that all the capabilities of the individual controls that you've purchased and implemented, that they are enabled. Because what we see a lot is that controls are bought, firewalls, proxies, antivirus, all the like, but not all the features are enabled. So there's generally more value to be extracted from existing purchases than there is in buying a fresh control. So have a look at that, do that evaluation, make sure that you've implemented what you can. That's always a great place to start.
Paul?
Yeah, I mean, not too different. We believe in first assessing the environment. To Rian's point, unless something's not really doing the job that you need it to be done, then it's really around understanding whether all the features are on, but really understanding your own market, own segment that you're in. So I mean, if you're an FSI versus retail versus manufacturing, you've all got every industry's got its own permutations and own vulnerabilities as an organization. So looking at understanding that. So really understanding your current landscape, looking at understanding where those gaps are with the obvious gaps. So talking your low-hanging fruit is really where the gaps are today. Let's see how we can understand how we can mitigate against those. And if there's a requirement for additional tooling, then maybe that's a conversation. If it's a requirement for enhancing current tooling, maybe that's a conversation. Or if there's a requirement for maybe managing that on your behalf, that's another conversation. So that really starts with that assessment and understanding of an organization's landscape, their business, their strategy, their current environment, and then the gaps.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. That is Paul Spagnoletti, who's the digital and technology business executive at iOCO, and he was joined there by Rian Nodia, the director of consulting at F-Secure. Thank you so much to iOCO and F-Secure for making this conversation possible. Remember, the recording will be available and emailed to you if you want to go back to certain aspects and have a listen. Again, thank you so much for your questions. Until next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Awesome.
Thanks, Sasha.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.